Draft Utopia, folks. We are in the home stretch of Season 15 of Draft Utopia on TalkShoe, episode 993, 7 episodes away from the season finale on TalkShoe and Restream, and we will have a new change coming in Season 16 of Draft Utopia. I finally figured out how to screen share on TalkShoe, which I tried to do on my computer in the past, but it was a disaster because TalkShoe would disconnect me from the podcast. But we figured out how to do that this morning. All you have to do is turn your camera on with your iPad and aim it at the computer, and that's literally all we have to do. But yeah, we will implement that change when Season 16 of Draft Utopia premieres. I'm very picky when it comes to implementing changes. I don't like to implement changes until a new season starts. I'm very picky about that. But yeah, let's get into the NBA draft because that's what people are here to listen to. I do have a mock draft. I've also got an NBA Draft Simulator if Joey or William wants to make picks as well. So with that being said, we'll get started here. I've got the mock-up. I've got the simulator at 60 players. If there's a player you think I'm missing, I'm open to expanding this list to 70 because we have 60 players on it, but there were 73 NBA Combine invites. So I would probably, if we expanded this, we'd probably expand it to either 70 or 75 before the draft. And if any other players who weren't on our radar get drafted, we'd add those players after the NBA draft because we had 78 players on the WNBA simulator. So just say, all right, on that note, I'm starting the mock. I've still got Dibansa here. You've seen Joey and I, we've already broke down the top 15 earlier on previous shows leading up to the draft. I still think Dibansa's the pick at 1. And I think the only way this happens is if Utah gives you 2, they give you the player you wanted in last year's draft, Ace Bailey, and they give you like a future first-round pick. That's the only way I see the Wizards moving down, and I don't think they're going to entertain that offer unless Trae Young and D'Angelo Russell both come out and say, we're not exercising our player option. F you, we're testing free agency. If both of them are on board to come back, I think they go Dibansa and they keep the pick. I think it would take both of those players opting out and them just being in a situation where they're forced to take Darren Peterson to trade down. I don't think that's going to happen. And I like what the Wizards have built here. They do have some decent bench players. Bilal Coulibaly is your current starting small forward. He did good, but I think Dibansa elevates you to a whole nother level. And I think with the pieces you'd have 7 to 8 quality players and a good starting 5, 3 bench players. You could push for a play-in round, maybe even get to the playoffs. I don't want to push it though. Peterson, he did slightly better than Dibansa in high school, but Dibansa led the country in points per game in college last year, and he can defend everybody. He's led the country in scoring. He can defend every type of position. I think the Wizards are going to take him at 1. I'd be very surprised if Dibansa wasn't number 1.
Well, the thing about Dibansa that actually makes him good is it's not the three-point shoot. We're seeing with the Knicks probably going to win the championship. Three-point shooting is a little overblown. But what makes him good is that shooting from the free throw line and in. And that field goal percentage from around the top of the key. Not all the way out to 3, but around that area, that 12 to 18 footer. So, and that's what makes him good. If he can keep his free throw percentage up, that is what we're going to be looking at and saying, well, he gets 10 free points a game. Pretty nice chunk.
Yep. Sounds like we're both leaning towards the Wizards taking Dibansa at 1. you had Boozer before with the Wizards, and it's possible they take Boozer since they hired Carlos Boozer. But I think George, Bailey, Markkanen, Jackson, Kessler, they have a good idea of what they want to do, and they could take either Peterson or Boozer at 2, regardless of the situation. And they could even entertain Caleb Wilson if they want to move on from Lauri Markkanen, because Markkanen was a 4 that moved to the 3. So they could even entertain that as well. But I think they're going to go Darren Peterson. They're going to get him as a point guard. And he's the one guy in this draft that can jump Keontae George on the depth chart. But at the same token, they also have the flexibility to ease him in. I think the Jazz are also in a good spot to where they're going to find a way to get out of their rebuild. He modeled his game after Devin Booker, which is very fascinating because Booker was a shooting guard that converted to point guard once Chris Paul left the Suns. So, and Peterson's probably going to make the same transition, even though he had a low assist total. And his agent's already told NBA teams he'd prefer to play point guard, so I think that's probably where he'll end up. But he could also get drafted by a team as a shooting guard if Utah were to pass on him. But I think Utah's going to take him at 2. But we'll see. We'll see what the Jazz do at number 2. Regardless, I think Peterson and Boozer are the other 2 guys in the top 3, regardless of what order they end up going in. And I think regardless, that's going to be your top 3. It just depends. You got the same order as last time. I'm just curious. The same top 3 as last time. Because I feel like this could go either way. And Boozer really does have the skill set to succeed. And I think if he's there for Memphis at 3, this is going to be a very easy pick. You replace Jaren Jackson Jr. with Cameron Boozer, and you get that 5th starter to your starting 5.
For the most
I think if he's not there.
Because the last time the Grizzlies were really good, it was Pau powerful.
Yeah.
And then he obviously moved on to the Lakers where he actually got recognized. The last time that
then they got Jaren Jackson, who was steady, but they traded him to the Jazz. And that's the only thing keeping me from giving the Jazz Cameron Boozer. That's literally the only thing, because they gave him like a 5-year extension after trading for him. That's the only reason I've got Peterson at 2 as a lock. If they didn't give him such a lengthy extension, Jaren Jackson, I think this would be. I think Boozer would be in the conversation to go second. But we'll see because Joey might still have Boozer at 2 and Peterson at 3. But regardless, I think the Jazz giving Jaren Jackson Jr. that contract extension after trading for him from the Memphis Grizzlies, I think that's the sole reason. And the Memphis Grizzlies do have the Utah Jazz 2027 first-round pick. They were the one team that voted against the new NBA lottery rules because the new NBA lottery rules are not going to let a team that's picked in the lottery 2 years in a row pick in the top 6 of the 2027 NBA draft. Like they're saying the Jazz might have to move down to like number 10. They're going to make the owners for the NBA voted to make the NBA lottery like the MLB lottery, where if you're picking in the lottery multiple years in a row, you move down to number 10 or whatever. I don't agree with it, but that's what and it was a 29-1 vote. It wasn't even close. Memphis was the only team to object to the new rules, which are going to be implemented next year. So, and they only voted to object those rules because they wanted the Jazz's 2027 first-round pick, which Memphis owns from the Jaren Jackson trade, to be as high as possible. That's the only reason they objected to the rules. So, but yeah. But that's the thing. A team picking 4 through 6 next year is going to have higher odds at the number 1 pick than a team picking 1 through 3. That's really messed up. I think they probably should have reduced the odds to like 10%. The teams in the bottom 3, they all get 10% odds at the number 1 pick, but then you make it like 9 or 8% for 4 through 6. Instead of just making it 14, 14, 14.2, and then 10% for number 4, I think they should have reduced it to 10% for the for the bottom 3, but they still have the best odds. So I think the process for how they the new system, they kind of screwed that up. But yeah, do you still think the Jazz are going to take Boozer at 2, or are you leaning Peterson here? Now that you know the Jazz gave that lengthy extension to Jaren Jackson as well as a 2027 first-round pick to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Jared Jackson was never somebody I cared a lot for. So for me, I'll just keep it the way it is.
All right. So Joey had Boozer at 2 and Peterson at 3. And to be fair to Peterson, if Peterson falls to 3, he will be a shooting guard. I know they got Cedric Coward. He was great as a rookie, but Peterson's just a much better player, much higher ceiling, and they already have Ja Morant at point guard. So Peterson would be a shooting guard in Memphis. So just saying. Just to add context to that. Number 4, I think we both had Caleb Wilson to Chicago, but Caleb Wilson, you've got Trey Jones, Josh Giddey, Mataz Buzelis transition from the 3 to the 4 at power forward with Patrick Williams injured, and Jalen Smith's your center. Getting that small forward to round out the starting 5. The Bulls have only drafted 2 players out of North Carolina, Kobe White in 2018, who I believe is now on the Magic, and Michael Jordan. That's it. So they've only drafted one other Tar Heel since Jordan, which is interesting. And the last time they were picking this high, they got Derrick Rose at 1 in 2008, and I think before that they got Jordan at 3 in 84. But Caleb Wilson, I think he can play the 3 or the 4, and he was a player who wasn't on my radar at the beginning of the season, but by the time we got to December, Emmanuel Watson was already telling me this guy's going to go in the top 5. And by that point, he was firmly locked into the number 4 spot from December, and he's held on to that spot since December, which is not a surprise. Caleb Wilson was North Carolina's best player. He got injured in the ACC tournament, couldn't play in March Madness. That's the only reason the Tar Heels didn't make it out of the round of 64. And I think Caleb Wilson, it's a very easy pick here for Chicago at 4. Yeah, and then number 5 is where this draft really begins. The Clippers, because Indiana's pick was top 4 protected. It wasn't top 5 protected. I don't think they calculated the possibility. And Ivica Zubac is now the starting center for the Pacers, because the Pacers replaced Miles Turner with Ivica Zubac, who was a good starter on the Clippers, and Ivica Zubac was a good center on the Clippers for many years. So the Pacers, they replaced Miles Turner with Zubac, and now you're getting Halliburton back. So I think that does help the Pacers a little bit in terms of having a starting 5 for next season, because losing Miles Turner and Halliburton, I think, is the biggest reason the Pacers regressed as much as they did. The Bucks ended up getting Miles Turner in free agency. So, I think right now I've got Keaton Wagler here because they don't have a shooting guard. You got Garland, you got Kawhi Leonard in a contract year, you've got Derrick Jones Jr. in a contract year, and you've got Brook Lopez at center in a contract year, and you've also got rumors Brook Lopez is going to retire. That's according to Emmanuel Watson. So I believe the Clippers are going to take a shooting guard here at 5. They'll get the best shooting guard on the board, Wagler. I think Joey gave them either Braden Burries or Nate Ament. I can't remember which one. Wagler, though, is from Shawnee Mission, Kansas. Why is that important? That's where I used to live before I moved to Pittsburgh in 3rd grade, Shawnee, Kansas. That's exactly the exact town I lived in. So it's pretty cool that I lived in Coral Springs, Florida until I was like 4 or 5. I don't have a lot of recollection of, I knew we had a pool and we had a dog. I don't have a lot of other memories of the house in Florida. I was told I slept through Hurricane Andrew. I have a lot of memories of Shawnee, Kansas, a lot of fond memories, good memories. And then I've got some memories of Pittsburgh because it's where I spent majority of my life. So I've had 2 players. I've gotten to see a player drafted from my hometown in Kansas and my hometown in Pittsburgh in my lifetime, which is actually pretty cool. Have you seen anybody in your hometown drafted in any of the professional sports in your lifetime, Joey? I'm just curious.
No. There's
Okay.
There's nothing where I grew up. Closest would be Joe Burrow. No, 20 minutes away from me.
Yeah. At least you, yeah, at least you got to see a number one pick in your lifetime as a coach. So that's pretty cool. Wagler, though, I think Wagler's the guy that they're going to pick, but there's a lot of guys the Clippers could pick at 5. If they're moving on from Lopez, Derek Jones, or Leonard, they could very easily go with one of those positions at 5. The one position I don't think the Clippers will draft is point guard because they just Garland still has 4 years left on that contract, and when they traded Harden for Garland, they inherited that contract. So I think the Clippers, for that reason, they're not going to take a point guard at 5. But I think everything else is on the table. Shooting guards on the table if you want to roll with this starting 5 that got you 10 points per game this year. And if Brook Lopez retires, Ademar is on the table. If you want Nate Ament, who Joey, I think, mocked the Clippers last time, you could go him and groom him behind Leonard. So basically everything's on the table. You could also go Yaxel Lendenborg with Michigan and groom him behind Derek Jones because you've got 3 starters entering the final year of their contracts, and then you've got a shooting guard as the glaring need. So this is where things get dicey, Joey. I'm just curious what you're thinking at number 5 here. Because I went Wagler last time. I don't know necessarily. You wanted Burry. I remember you wanted either Burries or Ament at 5, and I think you went with Ament, but it was very close because Ament was a preseason top 5 player. Had sort of an underwhelming freshman year, but still a lottery pick. When I say underwhelming, I mean slightly disappointing for a player that was hyped up as a top 5 guy coming out of high school. He was not a liability. Not horrible, but
I'll stick with it.
So Joey's sticking with Nate Ament, same as last time. And then the Brooklyn Nets at 6. I think the Nets are going to go best player on the board. The reason I say that is because Kingston Flemings is the only point guard in this draft that defends at a high level. And Igor Demon can play point guard and shooting guard. He was a shooting guard at BYU, but they moved him to point guard once he got to the NBA because he played point guard in Spain. He played shooting guard at BYU. And I think Igor Demon's going to move back to the 2, and Brooklyn's going to go best player on the board versus drafting for need. But in this scenario here, they could keep Demon at point guard and go with Keaton Wagler, or they could go with Braden Burries as well. They could go with either of those 2 at 6 and keep Demon at the 1, or they could take a point guard if that's the best player on their board and move Demon back to the 2. It really is a best of both worlds scenario because Brooklyn drafted Walter Clayton out of Florida. He's still the backup point guard. So either way, this is a win-win scenario for the Brooklyn Nets, I think. As long as they come away with an impact player, they don't lose in this scenario, regardless of whether they take a point guard or a shooting guard, They don't lose in that scenario. But Kingston Flemings is the only point guard that defends well in addition to shooting well. That's the big selling point with me. I think both a Cuff and Mikal Brown Jr. are great scoring passing point guards, but they both need a lot of work defensively. Whereas Flemings, he's not just a great defender, he excelled in Kelvin Sampson's system, pushing senior Milos Uzan for more minutes as a true freshman. So that's why I've got Flemings as high as I do. But I think here, if it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with the Brooklyn Nets at 6. I think it's a guard. I just don't know if it's going to be a 2 or a 1. That's the tricky part. You got Wagler here. You've got Flemings. Got a Cuff, who I really like as a shooter. I think a Cuff's probably the best shooter of these 3, but a Cuff and Brown are both horrible defensively compared to Flemings, who excelled defensively. You could go Burries here too, but I think it's a guard. I don't remember who you gave Brooklyn at 6 last time.
Neither do I.
So, but yeah, Wagler, you've got Flemings, you've got a Cuff, Brown, Burries. Let's
go with Burries.
Let's go with Burries because that's the. All right, we'll go with Braden Burries at 6 in yours. Let me. All right, so now we're on number 7. I've got the Sacramento Kings taking Darius Cuff. They've got Levine, DeRozan, Murray, and Sabonis, but their starting point guard Russell Westbrook is set to be UFA. And after trading away both Davian Mitchell and De'Aaron Fox, and now Westbrook was your stopgap, I think the Kings are gonna draft a point guard. It just comes down to which one they like the best. He did win the Allen Iverson Player of the Year award in high school. Cuff did. He's a great shooter, great passer, but his defense is the weakness in his game. But he's good enough to be a day one starter because he's so exceptional offensively as both a shooter and a passer. So I went with Darius Cuff here, but you know, it's interesting here. I think Flemings is the best of the point guards, and I don't really see another glaring need for the Kings outside of point guards. So if you want a different position, I can go that route as well. I can also pull up the Kings' contracts.
Nah, that sounds good. Kings need a point guard. They haven't had a good one of those since. Good what?
Yeah, they had De'Aaron Fox before they traded him, and before that they had Bibby. But when it comes to the Kings' star point guards, the old school NBA fans think of Bibby, the new school fans think of Fox, and there's really nobody else besides those two that most fans think of. So, and Zach LaVine does have a player option. So if he exercises the player option to opt out of his contract, they could go with Keaton Wagler. I don't think he will. We would have heard something about LaVine by now if he had, but LaVine and DeRozan are both in contract years as well. But the Kings can use a second-round pick to get a successor to one of those two. I think the Kings are probably going to pick point guard here. We're on the same page. I'm guessing you're going to take Fleming since he's available, and the other 2 point guards that I like are not great defensively.
Yeah.
But if you want one of the other 2 point guards, I can do that as well.
Good.
Brown was Phelan actually looked good in the tape I watched. Brown was good, better than Phelan, but he didn't play much in the tournament. Cuff really dominated in the NCAA tournament, but offensively, but at the same time, defense was a weakness. He hasn't fixed that, whereas Fleming's is good offensively and defensively, thriving in Kelvin Sampson's system, pushing Milos Uzan for minutes to the point where Sampson had to start 2 point guards for the first time. So I think Joey would take Fleming's here, but I want to confirm that before I assume anything.
Yeah.
Because the gap between Fleming's and the other 2 point guards is a pretty big gap defensively, and they're all right. Let's move on to number 8 here, the Atlanta Hawks. I went with Mikal Brown Jr. because they traded Trae Young. You still got Nickeil Alexander-Walker at shooting guard, Dyson Daniels at small forward, Jalen Johnson at power forward. Onyeka Okongwu was a power forward coming out of the 2020 NBA draft. And you got Zachary Risacher. So you do have some players, and this is the Pelicans' first-round pick as well. So, I mean, you know, so we'll see what happens. I went with Mikal Brown Jr. because he was the only point guard available, but between Brown Jr. and a Cuff, I would think the Hawks are taking a point guard here at 8. Let's go back here. I'd be shocked if the Hawks passed at a point guard. And they've got another first-round pick from the Cavs. They've got the Cavs' first-round pick. So the Cavs have the Spurs' first-round pick, but the Hawks do have the Cavs' first-round pick. If they want to go best player on the board and then get their point guard later in the draft, they do have the flexibility to do that. So, you know, that's what makes the Hawks interesting at number 8, because I think they do need a point guard to round out. And Alexander Walker had over 10 points a game, but he doesn't scream star player. Dyson Daniels doesn't scream star player. I would argue Jalen Johnson's the only player that screams star player. And there's not a player in this group that screams superstar with Trae Young off the roster. So ultimately, your goal as Atlanta Hawks is not just to get a player that can round out your starting 5, but ideally to get a point guard that becomes a superstar and takes over for Trae Young. I think that's the goal here if the Hawks want to contend again down the road. And it's a very, I can understand why ESPN's saying this is the deepest NBA draft since 1996. It's very top heavy at the top. Like the first 15 to 20 picks, it's very top heavy. Do I think it's the deepest draft I've ever? No. Look at the second round. There's some good players in the second round, but most of the second round is seniors and international players. I had one freshman fall to the second round. They came off the board at 31, and the rest of the draft was seniors and international players. So, again, if you're the Hawks, Joey, what do you want to do here at number 8?
Oh, Hawks at 8. It's a little more difficult because the Hawks have been perpetually in failure mode for the majority of the last couple decades.
Yeah. They did make the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021, but outside of that year, they have been a disaster of a team.
Yeah, they've been a mess. And the big thing I'm looking at right now, they need to go down real quick in your prospect board.
All right.
They need a true star. And I can't see anything that's going that fast.
Oops, I meant
They need a true star, somebody who can.
I accidentally clicked on Wagler. I'm sorry about that, but you can I don't feel like restarting it, but if you want me to restart it and you want to pick someone else, I can.
Nah.
So they'll go Wagler here, but they'll take a point guard with the Cavs pick in this scenario because Wagler was the best player on the board, but their biggest needs at point guard. So that's probably what the Hawks are going to do here. Now the Mavericks are another team that they need a center to round this group out. They trade Anthony Davis away. Derek Lively goes from averaging 11 points as a rookie to 8.6 in year 2 once Davis comes in, and now he only averaged 4 points a game once Davis got traded. So, look, I know a lot of Mavericks fans are going to say, oh, Kyrie Irving's going to get traded. Look, if you get a third first-round pick for Kyrie Irving, then trade him and take a point guard. But my stance is you take Mara and you roll with this group for now. You still have Klay Thompson on the bench. Klay Thompson's your backup shooting guard. He was the starter at the beginning of the year, but he only started 8 games. And he played 62 games. He only started 8. And Christie got a majority of the reps as the starting shooting guard this year. And Kyrie Irving was out for all of the season. But he should be healthy for next season. And if you're banking on Kyrie Irving coming back and you're banking on, Klay Thompson being an effective 6th man in this lineup, then I think you can go Mara at 9. Otherwise, you take the point guard and reload. Joey, I remember, gave the Mavericks a point guard in the last mock we did. I think he gave them either a Mikal Brown. I think he gave the Hawks a cuff and he gave the Mavericks Mikal Brown. But now that Wagler got picked by the Hawks, I'm kind of curious if he's going to still go best player on the board route or if he's going to go with a center. Because,
well, at this point, I think they're one and the same.
Yeah.
Is Mara still there?
Mara is still there.
Yeah, so I think they're about one and the same at this point.
Yep. and I went with Braden Burries at 10. Obviously, the low need for the Bucks is a shooting guard, but the Bucks could blow things up. And what I mean by that is if Giannis gets traded before the NBA draft for additional draft picks, and this always happens. There's always a trade the week of the NBA draft. There's always a trade, and it screws up the draft order, and I have to go back and redo the mock draft, redo the draft results page, because the trade impacted the order of the draft. So if there is a trade, I think it will be Giannis. There's been a lot of talk about where he's going to end up. But until Giannis is traded, I think it's Braden Burries if he makes it to 10. Now, if both Wagler and Burries are off the board at 10, the Bucks are in a little bit of trouble. Their situation becomes a little bit dicier because now it's like, all right, who's the best shooting guard available? Or do you want to go with a power forward, prepare for the possibility of losing Giannis now if a trade does happen before the draft? Because I think those are the two positions they're going to be targeting here. And look at the simulator. You've got point guard, center, small forward. Lendenborg, if you trade, you could go Lendenborg if you trade Giannis. And then your next best option at shooting guard is Cameron Carr out of Baylor. And I like Cameron Carr. I like Lendenborg. Those both feel like light reaches at 10. But if you are certain Giannis is getting traded, you can go Lendenborg at 10, take the best player, and then just get a shooting guard with that next first-round pick that you end up getting once Giannis does get traded or once you know what you're getting back for him. But I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but it does make things a little bit more, not a whole lot more difficult for Joey, but a little bit more difficult because right now, I've seen Swain in the lottery. I haven't seen Carr. I've seen Carr at 15 in some mocks. I've seen Swain in the lottery as high as 13. But this is a difficult situation for the Bucks at 10 since both of the shooting guards that I had in the top 10 are off the board, and that's their biggest need. Do they want to reach a need and try to run this back if Giannis wants to play one more year? But because Giannis has the player option in 2027, and then he's a UFA in 2028. So right now, if the Bucks want to maximize their return for Giannis, they're probably going to have to move him this summer or at next year's trade deadline. And they will probably lose a little bit of leverage if they wait until next year's trade deadline to move him. So that's where this becomes very tricky.
It's not as tricky as you think. I've been following this a little bit, and
I like Ryan Rollins, but I'd also argue that a Cuff is an upgrade over him, just in terms of star power. I like Ryan Rollins. He averages 10 points a game, so you could go point guard as well, too.
Well, it really has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the ego of the owner. Jimmy Haslam does not like the Cavs owners. They're tense in public, but they're cordial. But they do not really care for each other. And so if you look at it, and I think that's what's going to prevent the Cavs from trading for Giannis, even though we've heard all the rumors. That means we're also looking to who else has pieces to trade for him. And I don't think there are a lot of teams that do, because they're going to be looking for young people. That means they're probably going to go with somebody who can complement him, because unless somebody comes up with an offer of young players and draft picks like the Cavs could, I don't think he's going to.
There are 3 teams. There were like a month ago, there were like 10 teams in the running to get Giannis. Bleacher Report has reported it is down to 5 teams. And Bleacher Report saying it's 3 teams. Reddit is saying it's down to 5 teams. A Heat insider, a Bucks insider is saying it's down to 5 teams, and Bleacher Report saying it's down to 3. It was like at 10 was like at 10 to 15 teams when the Bucks were not. When the regular season ended, it was at 15 teams. Then the list came down to 10 teams. So Bleacher Report is saying that the Celtics, Heat, and Bucks could engage in a 3-team trade. The Celtics, Timberwolves, and Trailblazers are so Celtics, Heat, Timberwolves, Trailblazers, and Magic are the 5 finalists for Giannis. So of those, the Heat have the most draft picks, but I feel like the Heat, they need the Heat, I'll get to them when we get to them, but right now I've got the Miami Heat. I've got small forward listed as a need with Wiggins at power forward. I've got point guard. They've got Davion Mitchell and Jaku Sionis at point guard, but neither of them average 10 points a game. Norman Powell, who plays the 3 as a UFA. I don't think the Heat have what the Bucks want. So I don't think they will get Giannis. The next teams on this, the Celtics, if they trade Jaylen Brown and 27 and something else for Giannis, whether it's a bench player, I could see the Celtics and Bucks doing a swap. The Trailblazers, again, they don't have a first-round pick this year at 15. I don't think they have a second-round pick this year either, so I don't see the Trailblazers getting Giannis. So, and then I think that leaves the Celtics, the Timberwolves, and the Magic. And I'm guessing if the Timberwolves wanted Giannis, they would have to give up. They'd probably either have to give up Rudy Gobert or Jalen McDaniels. They're not giving up Ant, but they would probably have to give up, because Julius Randle's in his 30s now. I don't see the Bucks taking Julius Randle and a first-round pick at 27 and then another first for Giannis straight up. I think that the Timberwolves would almost certainly have to package Rudy Gobert or Jaden McDaniels, the small forward, in order to get Giannis in a trade. That's why I'm kind of leaning towards the Magic and the Celtics as the 2 finalists, Joey, because Paolo Banchero is a young player, and even though the Magic don't have a first-round pick, Banchero was a number 1 overall draft pick. So if you include Banchero and then a future first, that might be enough to get Giannis, honestly. But I don't know if Orlando wants to do that.
But it's not about whether that would be enough to get Giannis, but it is about whether they would want to add Banchero based on what they think of him play.
Yeah. And the frickin' simulator auto-drafted a cuff. All right, we'll move on to number 11 now. But, yeah, the conversation. I put Henry Vassar here to Golden State. They need a center to round out this group, and they do have Porzingis at center. I completely forgot the Warriors have Porzingis at center for 1 more year. So they could go best player on the
You mean 25 games?
I forgot the Hawks traded him to Golden State. I completely disregarded that until I was done with the mock, and I had to go in and check that yesterday.
No.
So that this pick probably won't be Vassar, but I do really like Vassar. There's only 2 centers in this draft that can shoot shots from short range, medium range, and long range. Everyone's at ESPN saying, "Oh, it's a generational draft. It's a very top-heavy, top 15, top 20, the best draft since '96." It's a very weak center draft. It's a great draft for point guards
since '96.
That's what ESPN's saying. It's the deepest NBA draft since 1996.
Of course they are, because they've got to do coverage. But at the end of the day, this is not that strong of a draft.
They're overhyping the draft because they get paid to cover the NBA Finals. They're overhyping the draft because the NBA is their most profitable sports league. Yeah, the NFL is profitable too, but they only get to host the Super Bowl once every 4 years now, whereas they get the NBA Finals every year. So for ESPN, the NBA is the favorite child. The NFL might be the child that gets the most attention, but the NBA is the child that's the favorite within the ESPN family because of the
because it's all
yes.
marketing. This might be the best draft in the last couple years, but best draft
I
since
don't even think it's
96.
better than last year's draft with Cooper Flagg and Con Newpel. Last year was a very strong first round.
I don't really think it is either. I don't
think it's a terrible draft. And at first, I wasn't as high on this draft as the media, but I came around to it. I looked at the talent in the draft class and I came around to it.
I haven't come around to it.
I came around to it where I'm warming up. I still don't think it's as strong as 25, but it's better than 24. I don't think it's as strong as 23 with Wembanyama. But you could debate better than 22.
I've just tried to be really positive over the last few weeks. So, I'm trying to be positive about this pick. But truth be told, not a great draft. It's got some really nice players.
I think it's better than 27. 27, I've heard, is a historically bad NBA draft. There were people at the McDonald's All-American game saying that both Magic Johnson and Larry Bird snuck Jack Daniels into the McDonald's All-American game and poured it into their Coca-Colas while watching these high school players at the McDonald's All-American game.
I don't think... Yeah.
I don't think that's true, but that's a hilarious rumor regardless. I don't think that's true, but that's a hilarious rumor regardless. And it illustrates how bad next year is if that is true.
You have to know the people. Magic doesn't drink anymore for obvious reasons. So he's probably drinking Coca-Cola. But Larry, he wouldn't have drank the Jack. What he would have done, he would have used his German imports. He would have poured one of those into a Coke cup, and he would have sat there and drank it like he was drinking a Coke.
Fair enough.
Like two very different personalities in that sense. Magic, his wild and woolly days were gone in the 90s. Larry, he's still a little wild and woolly, even in his 70s, 60s, 70s.
All right. What are you thinking at 11 here? Because the Warriors have all their starters back next season. Mikel Brown's the only player in the top 10. I do like Kareem Lopez. He would be the first player born in Mexico to be drafted in the NBA. Lennon Borgs would be a good player to groom behind Draymond Green. Phylan had really impressive tape, but he fell to 15. I think it's going to be... I think the drop-off begins after pick 17. That's where I think the drop-off begins in this draft.
What the Warriors have been missing over the last couple years is the athletic thing.
I love the top of this draft, Joey, but I think the drop-off begins after pick 17. And I think it's blatantly obvious. But because it's such a deep top 15, such a deep lottery, that's why ESPN's overhyping this draft for marketing reasons. But, yeah.
Can you scroll down?
All right. Yes. Okay. So you got Brown, Mikel Brown Jr., got Henry Pizarro. Kareem Lopez is from the New Zealand Breakers, top international player.
I think the New Zealand.
Yeah, he's from Mexico too, by the way. He's actually born in Mexico. He'd be the first player born in Mexico drafted in the first round of the NBA draft. Bazana was the first Australian drafted in baseball.
Yeah, big thing is they need athletic big men because that's what they've been missing, and it's been hurting. Get a young athletic big man, 6'8", 221, who can get up and down the floor, play some defense, get some rebounds, and you should be fine.
Yeah, and if Draymond Green's out, you can move Butler to the 4 and ease this guy in. And if both are healthy, you can have him learn under both Green and Butler and then get valuable minutes off the bench. Either way, it does feel like a win-win. So,
indeed.
All right, number 12 in my mock here. I went with Nate Ament. And Nate Ament's off the board in Joey's draft, but they got this pick in the Shai Alexander trade back in 2018. So You look at the Clippers, they've got Shai, they've got Caruso at the 2, Jalen Williams at the 3, Chet Holmgren at the 4, and Isaiah Hartenstein at the 5. Both Williams and Holmgren have been extended. We just don't know the estimate to what they're both going to get paid yet. That's been kept under wraps by GM Sam Presti, and they drafted Thomas Sorber out of Georgetown in last year's draft in the first round as their replacement to Hartenstein. But Sorber tore his ACL. He missed all this season. Dort's probably not going to be back. The Thunder have a club option on Dort. He underachieved, and the bench players at guard, McCain and Mitchell, are both better than Dort. And I think they probably should have played Caruso at the 2 instead of Dort. If they had done that, I think they may have beaten the Spurs and may have been back in the NBA Finals. But regardless, I think what Thunder are going to do with these picks is there are 7 players they reportedly love and would be open to trading up for. If they can't get one of those 7, they'll hedge their bets and try to get depth players at small forward and power forward. That way, if Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren's hot contract becomes too hefty, they can trade one of them, avoid the luxury tax, and still recoup some draft capital down the road. So I don't think Shai's going anywhere. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Thunder hit on one or both of these first-round picks at 12 and 17. I think what they're going to do is they're going to get competition and depth for Jalen Williams, competition and depth for Chet Holmgren. And if they get the right player, and that player that they draft in this draft ends up blossoming into a quality backup, they will move Holmgren or Williams down the road and try to get another team to take on that hefty contract. I think that's what they're going to do. They have too much depth at guard to take a guard. I went with Nate Ament, but obviously he's off the board, and Joey's. Emmanuel Watson's kept saying they need to take Lendenborg and trade Chet Holmgren because he was brutal in the series against the Spurs in Game 7 defensively. So I'm guessing that's the route Joey's going to go here with Yaxel Lendenborg still on the board here at 12. But the best player on the board is a point guard, but I think you could also move Sarver to the 4 if you take Visar here, but I'm guessing Joey's going to go Luxembourg. He's going to listen to Emmanuel Watson's suggestion for the Thunder at 12. But it's not an easy pick to make.
I would go with Visar because I think they need a guy in the middle. That's their biggest thing. 6'8", 220 or 6'11", 227.
Yep.
He has room to put on some meat. So if he can get up to 235, 240 in this league where everybody has
these weigh-ins are based on NBA Combine without shoes on. That's if you put shoes on the players, they're actually a little bit taller, but the NBA Combine, I took the NBA Combine official weigh-ins without the shoes on since that's how the official weigh-ins at the NFL Combine work, and used that as the definitive official weigh-in. So he might actually be 7 foot, but 7'1", but regardless, I that's how I do the weigh-ins. Whatever they weigh in without their shoes on, that's what I use as the official weigh-in. But the weigh-ins are subjective regardless of how you spin it. I went with Nate Ament here at 12, and then Kareem Lopez, I went with him at 13. I think Lopez is a very good defender as well as a very good shooter. He's off the board in Joey's mock, but yeah, it's the Heat are in a tough spot here. They need a 3 or a 1. They have Davion Mitchell and last year's first-round pick Jaku Sionis, who was in our top 5. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying, all right, Lendenborg and Brown are the only 2 players on the board that I think you could argue here at 13 if you're the Heat. But top small forward available, who is it? It's Morris Johnson, who is a power forward at Michigan, who's power forward in games when Lendenborg was out of the lineup. But he also played center when Mara was injured. And you know, it's going to be interesting to see what exactly the Heat do, because I think their 2 main needs are, I think they'll get a small forward at 13 and go with a point guard for depth to push both Mitchell and Jaku Sionis in the second round, but I'm not exactly certain what the Heat are going to do. They might go best player available as well, but the only positions they have locked up are Tyler Hero at shooting guard, Wiggins at power forward, and Bam Adebayo their 2017. Yeah. So it's that's going to be interesting to see what they do here. All right. So the Heat are in a tough spot because, I mean, I think they've got. I like Abe Boyo, and Wiggins was a former #1 pick. He's made the transition from the 3 to the 4. Hero's shown he can play both guard spots. So I think they're in a good spot regardless of what direction they go in, but I think it's going to be a guard or a forward for the Heat. You want me to scroll down? I'm guessing you want to keep looking at some options. Filan's also pretty good. Carr, if you want to move Hero to the 1, is an option. Heinz Steinbach is like the last 6'10" forward in this entire first round. And that's why that averages double-digit points a game and is an effective three-point shooter. And that's why I say after Steinbach at 17, that's really when the drop-off in talent begins, and you're basically drafting for potential after pick 17. There's still good players in the draft, Joey, but for the Heat at 13. But as a draft analyst and just looking at this draft class as a whole, I think after 17 is where the drop-off begins, despite how much the media has hyped up this draft.
A guy I like, and I'm surprised he's still there, is regardless of position or need, I'd go with Mikael Brown.
Yeah. He could push Jaku Sionis and Davion Mitchell for minutes right out of the gate at point guard, and that is a position of need. And I went with Luxembourg at 14 because Luxembourg, here's the thing with the Hornets. You have LaMelo Ball, you have Con Newpel, who Brandon Miller, and then you've got Miles Bridges at power forward in a contract year. But here's with the Hornets. They are in a tough spot because they're only going to have the luxury to pay 3 of these core starters. Right now, you're paying LaMelo Ball, and you've been paying Miles Bridges on a bridge deal. But Brandon Miller's going to be an RFA in 2027 when Miles Bridges becomes a UFA. And I think most Hornets fans would argue if you had to pick 2 players, you could only pay 2 players max deals on this team. Ball and Newpel are the 2 you'd want to pay. But Miller is the 3rd guy you want to pay. So I think Miller will get a bridge deal, and then that will put the Hornets in a situation where they either have to trade Miles Bridges or they get his replacement now. And luckily for the Hornets, they've got picks 14 and 18. So they can go with Lendenborg, and I've heard Lendenborg's a player they want to trade up for. I've heard the Spurs and Pistons both want to trade up for him as well. So, and unless Visar Amara slips to 14, I don't think Charlotte's going to draft a center to round out their starting 5. I think they're going to go after a long-term answer at power forward, knowing full well they're not going to be able to keep Miles Bridges because when Con Newpel and Brandon Miller are eligible for max deals, those guys are going to get prioritized over Bridges. And the reality is you're not going to have enough money to keep Ball, Newpel, Miller, and Bridges on long-term contracts that pay anywhere from $20 to $40 million a year. You're not going to have the money to do that without going over the luxury tax, Joey. And Miles Bridges is a good player, but the problem is he's the 4th best player. And you can't pay the 4th best player $40 million a year when he becomes an RFA, when you've got Miller who's an RFA, and then Con Newpel will be an RFA in 2029. You can't do that. It doesn't make fiscal sense to do that. So I think Lendenborg is the pick here for that reason. And because I think he's the best player available at 14 after the 2 centers. So he played at UAB for 2 years, had 2 really good seasons there. Then he transferred to Michigan and won a championship. So I went with Lendeborg here. And Lendeborg is also your top player as well. I mean, you could have argued point guard if LaMelo Ball kept getting injured, but LaMelo Ball actually stayed healthy this year, and Con Newpel had a great rookie season. That's why the Hornets got as far as they did. So that's why they got all the way to the play-in round. But they still need that final piece in the starting 5 at center, but they may have to hold back on that since there's not a center worth taking at 14. And they may as well say, okay, if we're going to move on from Miles Bridges, let's get the guy who's going to replace him now, and then we can gamble on a center at 18. If that doesn't work out, we can always get a center in a future NBA draft. I think that's the approach the Hornets are going to take. Best center on the board is Chris Sinak Jr., who I do have going to Charlotte at 18. He didn't average 10 points a game, but he averaged 9.5, and he was a 5-star recruit. And he did enter the year as the top center in this NBA draft. So, I mean, I think it's between Lendeborg and Sinak here, but I'll scroll down, show you your additional options. Carr, Steinbeck's also an option. He's from Germany, went to Washington. He's also an option here. And Morris Johnson played the 3 at Michigan, but he has the size to play the 4 at power forward as well. So I think, and Alan Graves is another guy. He's not as big as the other power forwards, but he has first-round tape. So that's the top 20. I could scroll down further than that if you want more options. But I think it's going to be a player in the top 20. It's just you're deciding on who it's going to be, if I had to guess. Wait.
And go ahead and go with Lendeborg.
Just go with Lendeborg? All right. I don't know what's going on TalkShoe. It's saying recording live stream audio. Did TalkShoe end on me? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because the live thing, did TalkShoe end on me? That's what I'm trying to figure out. No, TalkShoe did not end on me. Stop recording live streaming. No, I don't want to stop recording the live stream. It's just I saw the TalkShoe thing was at 0 seconds, and I'm trying to figure out, was that me or was that just a technicality on TalkShoe's end? So I reloaded it now, and I pushed and now the timer is working again. So I don't want to stop the recording on TalkShoe. All right, let's get back to the NBA mock. Technical difficulties on TalkShoe. All right, the Bulls, I think it's going to be Phylan. This is a luxury pick for the Bulls here, because if you've got your starting 5 solidified at 4 and you've got Portland's first-round pick, you go best player on the board. Phylan, I think, is a player you could start out on the bench behind Giddey, and I think his ceiling's higher than Giddey's, but he needs to work on his defense. He has the shooting and passing down to be an elite NBA point guard. My player comfort Phylan actually is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think from an offensive standpoint, his ceiling's that high, but his defense needs a lot of work. And having him start out behind Giddey is a good way to develop him, and I think he could surpass Giddey down the road and give you that second starter. But the Bulls could go a number of different directions here at 15. Well, I'll scroll down a little bit. Phylan, Carr, Heinz Steinbach, Chris Sinak Jr., Morris Johnson, Alan Graves. Bennett Sturtz is another point guard I like. He took Iowa to the Elite Eight, came back for his senior season. Koa Pete.
I like Sturtz. It's like, especially if he can take his team to the national championship. I'll put him.
Iowa knocked out Florida. Florida was the number 1 seed in their region of the bracket. Iowa knocked them out in the round of 32.
I will put in the same category as a Dante Moore type. Went back for the next year, and if he leads this team to a national championship, well, could be number one overall pick.
He got Iowa to the Elite Eight where they lost to Illinois, but he did knock out the defending champion Florida Gators in the round of 32, and he had a monster game in that contest. Because Iowa was like an 8 or 9 seed, and they beat a 1 seed Florida team, and that was the defending champions in the second round, which nobody had happening.
Well, he's a really good player, and if he can take that next step up to a great player and show that he's clutch in the playoffs and lead his team to a championship, that'll mold him straight up.
Yeah. So I think if you pass on File, and I think Sturtz is the next best option in terms of fits. But yeah, let's move. I'm on 16. The Memphis Grizzlies are on the clock. They have Phoenix's first round pick as well. I went with best player available, Cameron Carr. But this is an interesting spot. If you take they need a power forward to replace because you gave the Grizzlies Peterson at 3 because Boozer went to the Jazz. So I'm guessing you're probably going to go with Haynes Steinbach because that's a player I do like. He's the last 6'10" power forward in this entire NBA draft. Heinz Steinbach out of Washington.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that's who you're going to go with.
He's also a bigger bodied guy.
So those bigger body guys that can hit long range shots, they're going to get pushed up. Even if they aren't necessarily sure things, they're going to get pushed up due to the fact that there's a limited supply of 6'10" bigs at both the 4 and the 5. Well, there's a limited supply of 6'10" bigs at the 4. There's not a limited supply of 6'10" bigs at the 5 at center, but there's a limited supply of 6'10" bigs at the 4. Steinbach's really the last.
Even if he couldn't hit the long range shot, he's 6'10", 240, 250 pounds. He's strong. He's athletic. Well, that's at this point.
Jalen Williams. So, I think that the Thunder will get a depth player behind Chet Holmgren. But they could also draft a center and move Sarver, last year's first-round pick, back to power forward, which was his natural position, or the position he's projected to play in the NBA at Georgetown. So, but I think Steinbach would be an option. You could also go with the Michigan. You could also go with Sinak, because Sinak can play the 4 or the 5. You could go with Morris Johnson as well. He's 6'9", 251, but he played the 4 at Michigan, and he's 6'9" without his shoes on. If you put shoes on him, he rounds up to 6'10". So I think Johnson is an option. I think Sinak is an option, and I think Carr could be an option if you're looking for an Ademar replacement off the bench down the road, or a guy that could develop into a starting shooting guard if you want to move on from Caruso down the road as well. So I think the Thunder have a lot of options here. They're not as great as the options that they have at 12, but they're like one of the last teams in this draft that have options. And right now, Phelan and Carr are the top 2 players available, but I feel like the Thunder need forward depth more than guard depth. They have good starting guards, and they have good depth at the guard position with McCann and Ajay Mitchell. So it just comes down to what you want. And the problem is, after Steinbeck, you got guys like Allen Graves, Koa Pete, that are 6'7", that are much smaller than Steinbeck from a size standpoint. And I think that pushes Steinbach's value up. And even though I like these guys on tape, that's why I've said, Joey, after Heinz Steinbach at 17, and after these top 2 guys on the board, Phelan and Carr, I think there's a big drop-off in talent in this first round. They're still good players, but the chances of getting a star player or a superstar are much lower. You could still get a day 1 starter who's an effective starter, but not necessarily a star in the later first round. But I think
I would go in this situation with more as Johnson because he is another big guy, but he is an athletic small forward type that can. And one thing I've noticed is that some of the more aggressive players will kick around a lot of the small forwards in the NBA, and so having a big bodied small forward that can dish it out a little bit, that's kind of valuable.
I agree. That is valuable. And then number 18, I went with Chris Sinak Jr. I think this is there's only one center that I've seen make a 3-pointer and average 10 points a game. That's Nate Biddle, but he's a horrible defender, and he didn't even get invited to the regular NBA Combine. He got invited to the G League Combine. So Sinak wins out by default over Biddle for that reason. And Sinak was a 5-star recruit. Even with the rough freshman season, he still did enough on tape to remain in the top 20, and he showed he can hit every type of shot. He was only a short-range guy in high school, but he made medium and long-range shots, but not consistently, and continued to show that as he transitioned from high school to college. He can defend effectively at times, but he's inconsistent, and the inconsistency is really the biggest issue with Sinak. He's a guy who can do everything well at center. He just doesn't do everything well at center consistently. But if we're just going off upside here, he's the best center left in this draft. And I think the Hornets, they do need to get that final piece to their starting five. But at the same token, it's like, I don't exactly know what direction they're going to go in here. Did we both give Charlotte Lendeborg? Yeah, we both gave Charlotte Lendeborg with their first pick. But yes, it's either you get Filan and Carr are both really good guard prospects, but Charlotte has LaMelo Ball and they have Con Newpel, and both stayed healthy enough to where Ball had injury issues in the past, but he finally stayed healthy for the first time since his second year to where he's earned another year as the full-time starter. If he gets injured again next season, then you can bring up getting a guard for depth, but I don't think you can bring that up right now. He did enough this year to earn the benefit of the doubt for one more season, and Carr is probably the best center available. You've also got Quaintance is a good defensive center, but he's very raw offensively. He's limited to short range, and the only strong trait he has is he has an injury history too, Quaintance. So
He's also 6'9".
Yeah, which is small for a center. That's without shoes on. With shoes on, he's 6'10", but without shoes, he's 6'9". And I think Webb is like 7'2" or 7'3" without shoes on. I think he was 7'1" or 7'2" without shoes on. But yeah. But regardless,
you got to be at least 6'9" without shoes. Otherwise, yeah, you can still be good. We've seen 6'9" centers be good centers in the past, but it's difficult.
Yeah. I'll look at the center options here. You don't want Sinak or Quaintance because Charlotte really does need a center. I like Luigi Swigo was a preseason first-round pick for me. I actually like Swigo more on tape than Quaintance as a shooter and as a defender. 7'2", 289, didn't average 10 points a game, but he was very consistent as far as traits on tape, and he improved his medium range and long range shots despite having less points per game this season compared to his +1 year. He improved his medium range and long range on tape despite having less than 10 points per game. So,
how old is he?
Luigi Swigo? I'll look him up.
Yeah.
I mean, Luigi Swigo's 19. He turns 20 in January 29th. He's 19 already.
Okay, then Swigo would be a good pick for potential sake because as long as he's improving, he's still 19. You know, he's still got a couple years he can improve. He's got good size. Plays in Europe, he's good at it.
Yeah, he went from averaging 10 points a game in his +1 year to only 8.6, but his weakness was medium range and long range, and he corrected that. He corrected that despite the dip in points per game. So if he's correcting his weaknesses, I can look past the stats and the analytics. If he's correcting his weaknesses and showing consistent flashes, I can look past the points per game drop. But I have to see that on tape, Joey, in order to overlook that, you know? I have to see the final result. This is why the stats have to be congruent with the tape. And if the tape shows that you can overlook the stats, then you base your pick on the tape. And the tape's shown that with Swigo. So you're going Swigo here?
That's nothing to indicate.
All right.
Yes.
I did not
That's
mean to click on Terrace Reed Jr. That was an autocorrect thing. But I guess Toronto gets Terrace Reed Jr., the Connecticut center. He was at Michigan last year. He transferred to Connecticut. Good defender, can shoot from short range, medium range, not a long range shooter, but, you know, Toronto they've got a good starting center in Jacob Podol, so he would learn under them, but that's who Auto Draft gave Joey. So in my mock, I gave Toronto Morris Johnson. Joey gave Morris Johnson the Thunder, but my thought process was if Morris Johnson's there at 19 and he's played the 3, he's played the 4 and the 5, Toronto's just going to draft him from a versatility standpoint. His versatility means he's pretty much locked into the top 20, and I think he's going to be a player that can defend a lot of positions at a high level. So for me, that was the biggest selling point with Morris Johnson at number 19. That was the biggest selling point for me. All right. So number 20 here, was that William or is that Joey? Because I heard a baboop. Okay. Just want to double check. We're still live on Restream. I heard something. I just wanted to double check what that was. And number 20, the Spurs, I went with Alan Graves. They've got Fox. They've got Castle. They've got Devin Vassell. They moved Devin Vassell from the 2 to the 3. They've got Julian Champagne in a contract year for next season, and then Wemby's their center. And you've got Harper off the bench. You've got Keldon Johnson off the bench, moving from the 3 to the 2. And then you've got Carter Bryant, last year's second first-round pick, as your backup small forward. So power forwards like the low need for the Spurs. The problem is all the power forwards left on the board are only 6'7", and that's a bad problem to have. But Alan Graves is a player that I've heard a lot of people love. I was looking at Alan Graves, Koa Pete, and St. John's power forward Zubi Ejiofor, who I had the second round. I was debating between all 3 of those guys. But I think the Spurs need a power forward. They've got everything else. But again, they could also go Carr here if they wanted to replace Keldon Johnson with Keldon Johnson's in the final year of a contract, and I think he's a 2027 UFA. So they could go Cameron Carr here and deal Keldon Johnson. But I don't know. I don't think the Spurs will necessarily do that. But Alan Graves, Koa Pete, you've got Zubi Ejiofor. These are all 6'7" power forwards. This is the problem. The next tallest power forward is Trevon Brazil, 6'9". Isaiah Nelson, 6'9" as well. And then you've got all the power forwards in this draft are 6'9" or 6'7" after Steinbach. So it creates a really problematic scenario here for a Spurs team that needs a power forward. They might be better off trading this pick for someone if they can find a buyer, or they can find a player worth, that
the Spurs
that's worth this pick.
In the NBA Finals. That tells me they need to take the best player.
So needs not even relevant with you at this point. And there's a lot of people saying they need to trade Dylan Harper's been so good off the bench, they need to trade De'Aaron Fox. I don't think they're going to trade him right now, but I could see them trading him in 2 years from now.
They're getting their ass kicked by a team with a 4 3-point shooting team. That tells me take the best player.
Filan and Carr are the two best players on my board. And Filan is a player that I had at 15, and I think Filan averaged over 20 points a game this year. He had 22 points per game as a sophomore at Alabama. He had 10 points a game as a freshman at Alabama, and then he had 22 points a game at Alabama. So Spurs are getting a point guard that can average 22 points a game, that can push both Dylan Harper and Fox for minutes. But I don't know how much of an impact he'd have. Worst case scenario, you're getting a third string point guard, but you're getting a guy who can push both Fox and Harper for minutes. Could also go with Cameron Carr and move on from Keldon Johnson and get that backup shooting guard to Stephon Castle. That's also an option. The problem is the power forwards. While power forward might be the only immediate need for the Spurs in the starting lineup, you need some type of youth or energy to inject into this lineup. And I'm pretty sure Filan's the only player left in the draft that's averaged over 20 points a game. And I am at 15, but he fell to 20 in this mock. So I'm guessing you're going to go with him just based on that alone. Because you've got Fox, you've got Castle, you've got Vassell and Wemby. All four of those guys can average 20 points a game. The problem is none of them have averaged that in the NBA Finals outside of Wemby. And the Knicks are just doing more to win the series. So, if you're the Spurs, you want me to scroll down or you want to take Filan since he's the only guy averaging 22 points a game? You could go Sinak and move him to the 4. He's 6'10", 239. So you could take Sinak and move him to the 4 at power forward, which some NBA teams think is a better strategy. Because even though he played center at Houston, some NBA scouts are saying he projects better at power forward in the NBA. So you could address your biggest need and move Sinak to the 4. You could go Graves. I feel like at this point you could take the hometown Swain. I'm guessing it's going to be either Swain, Sinak, or one of the top two guys. Just looking at the board. Caravan is a guy you could take. Martinelli, those are both seniors that I really like. I don't exactly know what the Spurs would do here, though, at 20, Joey. But Filan's the only guy. If you're just looking for a star to inject some offense into the Spurs, Filan's the only guy that averaged 20 points left in the draft. The problem is you've got Fox and you've got Dylan Harper at point guard. So even though this guy can average 22 points a game, at best he's a third-string point guard on the Spurs. Not because he's bad, but because the other two players ahead of him are that far advanced in their development.
Yeah, this NBA Finals is both the first of the team need more scoring. So go down. Just a bit.
Filan and Carr are the top two board.
I would
go
with
Sinak, because Sinak can play the 4 at power forward as well as center. Sinak Jr. Could go with him.
I would go with Cameron Carr at this
All right,
point.
Cameron Carr.
He's ready to go, and he's the player that could be the biggest impact immediately.
Yeah. He can be a backup, really good backup to Stephon Castle, and with Keldon Johnson entering the final year of his contract, you could just reload and move on from Keldon Johnson at that pick. And then the Pistons at 21. I made the argument that Detroit sports has peaked. Tarek Skubal going to get traded from the Tigers. Dylan Larkin, the Red Wings captain, wants a trade. I don't know if the Pistons can do better than what they did this past season. And the Lions, I feel like they're going to go 9-8 and just barely miss the playoffs. I feel like Detroit sports, for the most part, has hit a peak for this decade. I don't know if I'm wrong. I feel like, but outside of the Pistons and the Lions, I don't see either the Tigers or Red Wings doing enough to close the gap. if the Tigers do trade Tarek Skubal, and Skubal's pitching against the Guardians today, but that's neither here nor there. Bennett Sturtz fell to this pick, so I gave the Pistons Sturtz as a backup to Cade Cunningham. So now they've got insurance if Cunningham gets injured. I think his floor is Jimmer Fredette. I think his ceiling's Tyler Hero, and he could definitely start on the Pistons if Cunningham gets injured next year. But Sturtz is off the board in Joey's draft simulator here. So in the draft simulator I'm using for Joey's picks. So I mean, the Pistons are in a good spot. They've got Duncan Robinson at shooting guard, Cunningham at point guard, Oscar Thompson. I know he averaged under 10 points a game, but people were saying he was the best defender on this team outside of Cunningham against the Cavs. And then you got Stewart at the 4. Even if Tobias Harris leaves, Stewart did average 10 points a game off the bench. And then you've got Jalen Duren, their center, who got dumped by Angel Reese. I don't know what the deal was there. It's not my business to talk about relationships, but there are some people saying that the Pistons are going to trade Jalen Duren rather than pay him. So I don't know what exactly the Pistons are going to do here with this pick. They're a very tricky team to figure out, but Filan averaged 22 points a game, and if Cunningham gets injured, you could just plug Filan in. There might not be that big of a drop-off. You could also go Sanak if you want to move on from Duren. So there are options for what the Pistons can do here.
I would plug in Filan here because Cade Cunningham can play the 2 and he can play it very successfully. So you could actually plug Filan in there, move Cunningham to the 2 on occasion, and run a dual point guard situation.
Yes, the Pistons traded Jaden Ivey with Bulls to get Duncan Robinson, but I just feel like he's a stopgap. And if you move Cunningham to the 2, you could get Filan here and just reload. So that's a good point, Joey. And then you get to the Sixers. They've got Maxey at point guard, Edge Coombe at shooting guard. Paul George can play the 3 or the 4. I feel he's better at the 3. He's listed at the 4 on the Sixers depth chart, but I think he's better at the 3. That's just my personal opinion. So this is either going to be a small forward or a power forward. I think this pick's either going to be a power forward or a small forward. I went with Koa Pete, the Arizona power forward, but he's only 6'7". Joey might go a different route. I'm not exactly sure. But, yeah, everyone in my top 17 is off the board. So basically it's Sanak, and then you've got a bunch of 6'7" power forwards. And then you've got Swain Quaintance. I do like Isaiah Evans. He got better at Duke this year after coming back. Caravan was on Connecticut for all 4 seasons, never entered the portal, won 2 championships, played in the 3rd game. So he's the only player on Connecticut who was a part of all 3 of Dan Hurley's championship teams that won the championship and lost to Michigan as the runner-up this past season. So Caravan's the only player who was a part of all 3 of the Connecticut teams that made the championship game in 3 of the last 4 years. So that's saying something. That might be why you take him. Martinelli also had 4 really good years at Northwestern. I have a late first on Martinelli, even though most have a second on him. But this is the part in the draft where you're beginning to roll the dice and reach for players in terms of value, Joey. And this is why I said once Heinz Steinbach's off the board at 18, you could still get a good day 1 starter, but you're not going to get that star player this late in the draft, I don't think. I think Heinz Steinbach is the last player in this first round at 17 on my board that could be a star or even a superstar caliber player. I think the star players come in limited supply this year. Now, you could still get very good bench players, and you could get a day 1 starter, but the odds of getting a star player after pick 17, I think, are significantly lower. What are you thinking here? I did scroll down a little bit. I've got Pete here. I've seen Swain in the lottery. Isaiah Evans is good. So is Caravan. So is Martinelli from the tape I've watched. but I'm just not sure what the hell the 76ers want to do here. Let me go back to
I think not.
Okay, I didn't hear you. That's my fault. So Sanat goes to the 76ers. He'll play the 4 in Philadelphia with Embiid there. And he can take over at the 5 when Embiid retires or the Sixers move on from him. The Hawks, I went with Swain here. I think they go with a remember, the simulator gave Atlanta Keaton Wagler at 5 or at 8. So Joey's probably going to go with a point guard here because that's the one position of need the Hawks need the most. And there are 2 point guards that are getting hyped up. You've got Christian Anderson, who's a sophomore at Texas Tech, and you've got Okori, who is a true freshman at Stanford. Those are my 2 first-round point guards still on the board. But yeah, the Hawks auto-drafted the best player on the board. They took Wagler, the shooting guard, at 5. So this pick's going to be a point guard. I like Jaden Bradley. He was a senior at Arizona. Braden Smith's a senior at Purdue. He's a really good player as well. Gillespie from Tennessee. You've got Milos Uzan, Bruce Thornton from Ohio State, Lipsy. I think it is a really deep point guard draft. When ESPN says it's a deep draft, I can get behind that sentiment if your thought process is a really deep point guard draft. I agree. It's a strong point guard draft. So if the Hawks take because remember, you go back to oh wait. I'm still sharing my tab here, but yeah. I went with a point guard at 8, Mikal Brown Jr., and then I went with Swain here. But back to Joey's simulator here. Hawks got Wagler at 8. I accidentally picked on Wagler before he could submit his pick. And point guard to replace Trae Young is the low need. So just looking at the point guards, Anderson and Okori are the best value picks. And I've seen Anderson and Okori at this spot in NBA mock drafts. I have. Because if the Hawks go best player over need at 8, point guard would be the de facto pick here. And there's a lot of good point guards, okay? There's a lot of good point guards in this draft, whether it's the seniors that I have second-round grades on, or whether it's a guy like Okori who's a true freshman, or Anderson who's a true sophomore. There are a lot of good options for Atlanta.
I see Braden Smith.
Braden Smith out of Purdue. All right. And now we get to the Knicks at 24. I went with Quaintance here. I wouldn't pick Quaintance personally, but I went through the Knicks starting 5. Brunson at point guard, Hart at shooting guard, Bridges at small forward, Anunoby at power forward, Towns at center. The Knicks have this starting 5 locked up until 2028. And I said on Manuel's show, I think the Knicks lose the next 2 NBA finals, but they win in 2028 over Minnesota. So if they win this year, I could see them winning a second in 3 years, but I think they lose an attempt to repeat next season. But they are positioned very well. They have Kolek for depth behind Jalen Brunson. And shooting guard and center are the 2 areas so if you draft a guy to develop, you want to get a guy to develop behind Hart or Towns so he can take over in 2028. And I think the Knicks are going to roll the dice on Quaintance because he's exceptional defensively, but he's raw as F offensively, and he's got an injury history. And there are people that are mocking Quaintance in the late lottery. So that's why I went with Quaintance. Would I pick Quaintance here? Absolutely not. But I think the Knicks would. That's why I mocked him. Now, back to Joey's simulator here. You've got Allen. You've got these 6'7" power forwards. You've got Dalen Swain, who I've seen as high as 13th. He could be a guy you develop under Josh Hart. I've got a feeling Joey's going with Swain here. because he's still on the board at 24. And Quaintance, the injury history is enough for him to say, you know what? If Towns wants to stick around as a starting center after his contract's up, that's who we'll bring back. We'll let Hart walk, and we'll get a guy we're grooming to be Hart's replacement here. And Dalen Swain can play the 2 or the 3 at Texas. He's a big reason why Texas got all the way to the Sweet 16 in the March Madness tournament before they lost to Connecticut. So I've got a feeling Joey's going to pick Swain here, but I mean, I'll look at the shooting guard options and I'll look at the center options. Malik Thomas and Swain are both freshmen. And then you look at some of the second-round guys. Ryan Conwell's a senior. Richie Saunders is a senior. Owa's a senior at Kentucky. Emmanuel Sharp's a senior. Peter Suter, it's a big reason Miami went undefeated. I do have a mid-second on Suter, even though some have him going undrafted. And Aaron Nkrumah from Tennessee State's another guy I like. I am at 59. And then, what's going to happen when we get past the first round? I'm guessing I'll go through my second round. I'm also guessing Joey doesn't want to make picks for the second round on the simulator. So I'll quickly go through my second round if my intuition's correct on that one. And then
I said Swain.
Acquaintance. Okay. Because with the contracts, I figured Lakers are up. I went with Duke's Isaiah Evans here. Because right now you've got Doncic at the 1. You've got Austin Reeves under contract for 4 more years. There are some people saying that the Lakers, they're going to let Reeves test the market. I'm pretty certain Austin Reeves is not a UFA. I'm pretty certain Austin Reeves is under contract for... I'll look at the contract. Austin Reeves is a 2027 UFA, but he does have a player option. That's why there's rumors about Reeves signing with another team for a bigger contract, a bigger payday. That's why. But if LeBron comes back, I think Reeves will stay with the Lakers for 1 more year, but he does have a player option. I think this will be a shooting guard or a small forward. I've seen centers mock the Lakers, but Ayton's under contract till 2028. And Isaiah Evans, I think he can be a day 1 starter with the Lakers. Isaiah Evans had 10 games where he made 50% of his three-point shots, and Duke was 10-0 in those 10 games where he hit 50% of his three-point shots. So if this guy's in the zone when it comes to hitting three-pointers, it's very hard to beat the team he plays on. And with Luka and LeBron just adding a third scoring option that can hit 50% of their three-point shots, I feel like it's something that could put the Lakers over the top. And I think this is the pick you have to make if Austin Reeves comes back and LeBron comes back. But I think LeBron, if he came back, it would only be for 1 more season, and then he'd retire after this year. And then you look at the board here. You've got some power forwards available if you want to plug one of those guys at the 3. You've also got Evans. Caravan's also on the board. Martinelli's another guy I like. But I don't think the Lakers are going to take a point guard. They could take a power forward if they don't think LeBron's coming back, but I'm almost certain this pick's going to either be a shooting guard, a small forward, or a power forward. Maybe a center if they want to bring someone in to push DeAndre Ayton. But I'm almost certain the only position the Lakers are exempt from drafting is a point guard, and that's because they have Luka. You know? But this is the only pick the Lakers have, so... And they could trade this away to get someone, too. I do think the Lakers are going to try to do everything to get one more before LeBron retires. What are you thinking here with this pick? Because...
I'm going with Alfred.
There are some people saying the Lakers window is closed.
I have heard enough to know that LeBron's at the end of his rope, and he may not even be back for the Lakers next year. So Graves to Gruden if LeBron does not come back.
Who are you going with? Alfred? I don't.
Graves.
Alfred.
Graves.
Alan Graves. I heard Graves now. That's on me. But I fixed it. I got the right player. I didn't screw up. I could have handled that better, but I didn't screw up. That's the bottom line. Moving on to Denver. They need a right now they have a good starting five, but Cameron Johnson's a UFA. He's the next UFA, so I think they're going to draft a player to groom for the future. I want Caravan. Caravan, won 2 championships at Connecticut his first 2 years. Then he led Connecticut to a championship as a senior, where Connecticut beat Duke. But yeah, I've got, I think Alex Caravan is the pick for Denver here, but, Caravan, they could also go Isaiah Evans out of Duke. I think it's going to be a small forward here. Remember, they drafted a shooting guard a few years ago, and they've got a second-round pick, so they could get someone. I'll go through all 60 picks in the mock, but I'm guessing Joey's only going to want to pick for the first round, because we're at the point in the draft where it's really hard to project what's going to happen after this point. But the Nuggets, they could go Koa Pete. They could plug him in at the 3, 6'7", 248. Could also go with Evans, Caravan, or Martinelli, who's senior at Northwestern, played all 4 years at Connecticut, 2 years at Duke. So there are some options for the Nuggets. Joshua Jefferson can play the 3 or the 4 at Iowa State. So there are some guys the Nuggets can take here. And really, I don't think there's as much of a drop-off as people think. But there's still guys you can get that can become good starters, like Swain and Graves. Those are guys who are going to be day one starters. I don't necessarily think they'll become star players, but they could be effective day one starters on the teams that draft them late in the first round. So, what are you thinking here, Joey? The Denver Nuggets, it's pick 26.
Caravan. Alex.
Koa Pete is there. Quaintance is there. Isaiah Evans, Caravan, I think. I heard Carr. All right.
Caravan.
That's who I've got to Denver as well. So we both have Caravan to Denver. I think that's the first pick we've agreed on since Charlotte. And yeah, so Joey went with Caravan. Back to my simulator here. Celtics, I went with another senior. Another senior. I know Nick Martinelli is a second-round grade in most NBA circles, but he had 20.5 points per game as a junior, and he had 23 points per game as a senior. And his first 2 years before he averaged 20 points in a game, he took Northwestern to the Sweet 16. So it's like, I can't sit here and say Nick Martinelli doesn't belong in the first round, because the Celtics, they moved Jaylen Brown to the 2 at shooting guard this year. They moved Jaylen Brown to the 2, even though he played the 3 mainly in the Celtics for many years. They moved him to the 2 this year, and if they're going to keep him at the 2, they got to draft another 3. If they want to move Jaylen Brown back to the 3, they got to draft a 2. It's just that simple. And Martinelli, I really like Martinelli's tape. Defensively, I like him as a passer. I like him as a shooter. I am a lot higher on Nick Martinelli than the consensus is. So, yeah. But you could go with Isaiah Evans out of Duke as well. Could also go with I think it's going to be a shooting guard if they move Brown to the 3. It's also possible that they trade for Giannis and they move Tatum back to the 3. That's also on the table. If they move Jaylen Brown, they'd have to draft a shooting guard if they end up keeping this pick. But I'm guessing it would be this pick and Jaylen Brown to Milwaukee for Giannis. Quaid is in the final year of a contract. I'm trying to figure out where the typo is on my write-up for Nick Martinelli, but all right. I do like Martinelli, though. I think he's a guy who could sneak into the first round. Oh, there it is. It's Espite. There's no D in despite. There's the error. All right. Fix that, and then we'll get back to the simulator here. Celtics are in an interesting spot because I feel like they need they're either going to trade this pick to Milwaukee for Giannis, and they're going to trade Jaylen Brown as well. They're either going to draft a shooting guard and keep Brown at the 3, or they're going to draft a small forward and keep Brown at the 2, because Brown played the 3 for many years. They moved him to the 2 this season, and now they need a 3 if they're going to keep Brown at the 2. So the question becomes, do you take Isaiah Evans or Nick Martinelli and keep Brown at the 2, or do you move Brown, or you keep Brown at the 3, which he played for many years up until this season, and draft him their 2? So I think that's the big question the Celtics have to address at 27. I don't think there's a wrong answer either way you spin it. And the only way the Celtics keep this pick is if they don't trade for Giannis. If they trade for Giannis, I'm expecting Jaylen Brown and this pick to be moved to Milwaukee. At minimum. Milwaukee might get more than that. They probably will get more than that. But at the bare minimum, I'm thinking it would be Jaylen Brown and this pick. Joey, what am I missing, and what are you thinking the Celtics are going to do here? Scroll down. All players. All right. Quaidens, Isaiah Evans, Nick Martin. Go with Pete. All right.
Yeah.
That's who we gave. That's who we gave the Celtics and Timberwolves. Timberwolves have everyone coming back except the point guard they traded for. They traded Rob Dillingham to the Bulls for a point guard that's a UFA, but they have every starter back except their point guard. And I went with Christian Anderson at 28. And that is the new Timberwolves logo, by the way. I got that on the site. It got leaked on Wednesday or Tuesday, the new Timberwolves official logo, and that is now officially on Draft Utopia. So, yeah. I like Christian Anderson a lot. I also like Okorie, who I do have going to the Cavs a pick later. But there's other point guards. Like I told Joey, it's a deep point guard draft. Joey might go off the grid and pick one of these seniors. He did take the Purdue point guard.
Anderson's a good pick for Minnesota.
Braden Smith. So Bruce Thornton, Milos Uzan, Lipsy. There are a lot of good options here. It's a deep point guard draft, so they don't have to take the sophomore Anderson or the freshman. You're going Anderson? I heard Anderson.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Just confirm. Now, back to 29. I went with Okorie because right now the Cavs have Harden at point guard, Mitchell at shooting guard, Struss at small forward, Mobley at power forward, Allen at center. They've got this starting 5 back for one more season. I think if you draft a point guard here and a small forward in 2027, you can keep that window alive if you draft the right players. But it's hard to get the right players when picking late in the first round of the draft, especially in the NBA. Harden does have a player option. He can opt out of his contract. I don't think he will. I went with Ibuka Okorie, the freshman point guard at Stanford. But, you know, it's possible the Cavs go a different route. I will share this tab instead. Right now, Quaintance and Evans are the top 2 BPAs. Top 2 point guards are Okorie and Arizona senior Jaden Bradley. Top 2 small forwards are Evans and Martinelli. But I think the Cavs are either going to draft a small forward or a point guard here. I could be wrong, but what have you heard with the Cavs?
heard that they potentially going to move on from either one of their guards or one of their bigs. So
One of their guards, I don't think they're going to move on from Mitchell, even though there are some hot big takes with them moving on from Mitchell. I'm guessing it's going to be Harden or one of the bigs if they do shake this up. It's going to be Harden, Mobley, or Jarrett Allen. My guess is they would either move Jarrett Allen or Harden if they do shake this team up. And I'm guessing you're on the same page with me there. If they shake
to a point, but they've also realized that Mitchell, you'll never win anything with Mitchell as your primary player.
Yeah.
So they may look to get another primary player at that position.
That's true. I'm just showing you the top 2 players on each of the big board on each of the boards here. But now we'll go back to all. Quaintance is great defensively, but he's a liability offensively, and he's got an injury history. I don't think the Cavs will pick him here. And they could just move Evan Mobley to center if they wanted to move on from Jarrett Allen. Evans makes sense if they want someone that can push Max Struss. So does Martinelli. Okorie is, I think, the best player to groom behind James Harden if you're looking for the Garland replacement.
I would take, out of those guys available, I'd go Okorie.
Okorie as well? So we both got Okorie to the Cavs.
Now, Chris, how does my audio sound right?
Your audience has done really well. Your audio's been much better today. I've been able to hear everything you've said.
Okay.
So your audio's been much better today on Restream. I know Restream's had audio issues in the past, but I've been able to hear everything you've had to say. But I'm not really the best judge when it comes to hearing audio. I would argue William's a better judge when it comes to hearing audio than I am.
As long as I can be heard and I'm clear.
I can hear you, and you're clear to me. All right, so the last pick is the Dallas Mavericks. I went with Jaden Bradley here because if you get a center at 9, I think we both ended up with a Day Mara here. If you get a center at 9, in Joey's first mock, he went with a point guard, but if you get Mara at 9, I think you get a point guard that can be groomed behind Kyrie Irving here. You could also go shooting guard, I guess, since Klay Thompson was supposed to be the long-term starter, but he got benched for Max Christie. I don't know exactly, but I think it'll be a guard regardless of it, whether it's a 1 or a 2, since the Mavs do have another pick in the second round at pick 37. So I do think it's not going to be a small forward. They've got Flag. They could go power forward if they want to get a replacement for P.J. Washington down the road when his contract's up. But I'm pretty certain the Mavericks are not going to take Quaintance if they take Ade Mara. They're not going to take a small forward either because they've got Cooper Flag at that spot. I went with Jaden Bradley here. But yes, looking at Joey's big board here, I don't think Mara went 9th. I don't think it'll be him. Evans, it could be Evans, but they got Cooper Flag. Unless the plan's to move Flag to the 4 when Washington leaves, and Evans would basically just be a bench player until Washington is no longer on the Mavericks. So Nick Martinelli, I think that leaves Jaden Bradley and Malik Thomas, the last freshman in this draft. Yeah, believe it or not, Malik Thomas is the last freshman in this year's NBA draft. As hard as that is to believe, Joey, because of NIL, Malik Thomas, who I have at 31, who's my top second-round player, who some have in the late first round, Malik Thomas is the last true freshman in this NBA draft. Everyone else is either a senior or an international player. As hard as that is to believe, that is the truth. And Quaintance is a sophomore, Isaiah Evans is a sophomore, so there's 3 underclassmen left. And then everyone else is either a senior or an international.
That was weird. For some reason, Restream just paused for a second, then fast forwarded straight to where you were. So that was a little weird. Not sure what that was about.
I don't know what that was about either. I'm checking my audio here. I'm going back to the
Yeah, it
restream.
wasn't an audio thing. It was just like restream just paused and then fast forwarded to where you were. The audio was still going, but the video was it just cut and then fast forwarded through.
Yeah, after
I'm
Joey
not
makes
sure
the
how
pick
that
at
works.
30, I'm probably just going to go through my second round picks and end the show. If Joey wants to
Yeah,
keep making picks for the second round, that's
I'd,
fine. But the thing is, my
I'd say
iPad's
Malik
at
Thomas.
13%, and I don't think he wants to make picks for the second round. And
Yeah.
my iPad's at 13%, which I'm using to record the show on TalkShoe. So I want to
Okay,
get through.
then
I want
I'll
to get
take
through this.
Malik Thomas and then Jaden Bradley for my next two, and then you can go straight through to the next round. So you can get that done
So
for your iPad.
yeah, so Malik Thomas is a Maverick, and then at 31, Joey took Jaden Bradley to the Knicks as a backup to Jalen Brunson. So that's and yeah, we can if there's still time on the iPad when we're done, we will auto draft for the rest of round 2 and see how it plays out. All right, is that fair compromise? I think that's a fair compromise. Because I have Jaden Bradley at 30, so yeah. Round 2. Round 2, I went with Malik Thomas to the Knicks. I went with Quaintance. I have Luigi Sotwigo here, but Swigo's a guy who could sneak into the first round. I've been watching some YouTube videos. There's some people saying the Lakers might take him at 25. And I think Swigo has first round tape. Despite going from 12.4 to 8.5 points per game, his medium range and long range shots have improved. That's why Joey has him at 18. Zubi Ejiofor was a player I considered moving into the first round. I was that impressed with his tape, but a lot of people have him in the second round, but I don't think he gets past pick 33. Kings get Ryan Conwell. Zach LaVine's going to be a UFA in 2027. I like Conwell. He has early second round tape. Terrace Reed Jr., he went to Toronto at 19 in Joey's mock, but he would be a backup for Wemby at the center position. Great defender, can shoot from short range. But he's not the mid-range, long-range shooter Wemby is, but he gives you a little bit more physicality in the boards. Joshua Jefferson, I went with him. He could play the 3 or the 4, and I just think that's going to be really attractive to the Clippers with Leonard, Jones, and Lopez all being UFAs. Richie Saunders, I went with him to the Thunder here. The Bulls, I went with center depth. Oh, Onyenso just makes a lot of sense here at 38. Trevon Brazil, I think getting a replacement to Tari Eason, who's a UFA next year, makes a lot of in 2028 makes a lot of sense. And Brazil's a guy you can put in the G League for a few years. And then I went with Baba Miller, and got that small forward for depth. So the Celtics have 27 and 40. I'd imagine if the Celtics trade for Giannis, they'd keep 40, but they'd trade 27 and another first, and I don't know exactly what they'd give up, and I'm guessing they'd give up Jaylen Brown, and they keep Tatum. Braden Smith, the Heat. I feel like Braden Smith majored in leadership 101 or leadership. That was the course he majored in. So Keyshawn Hall. Auburn small forward, I feel like he's good enough to push Carter Bryant. Otega Owa out of Kentucky's decent. These are guys who will probably start out as backups that could develop into starters. The key word is could. They probably won't. They'll probably be stuck in backup roles unless they prove themselves and dominate at the NBA level, but that's basically what the second round is at this point. And basically every player outside of Malik Benson, who Joey mocked at 30, every other player is either a senior or international. And a lot of NBA teams don't like drafting seniors early because of the age gap. You're getting a player that's 22, 23 versus 19. I gave the Kings Darian Williams. DeRozan's in the final year of his contract. I gave the Magic Felix Okpara. Everyone in the starting 5 is locked up till 2030. Okpara only averaged 5 points a game, but he's a great shooter on tape, and he can defend all 5 positions effectively. Tyler Nickel can play the 2 at point guard, or 2 at shooting guard, or the 3 at small forward. 6'6", 237. Peter Suter, I really like Peter Suter. I know he's an undrafted player in a lot of mocks, but Suter was a big reason why the Miami, Ohio Redhawks were undefeated in the regular season before losing in the MAC tournament to UMass, and then they lost in the round of 64 to Tennessee. But Suter started out at Bellarmine before transferring to Miami, Ohio as a junior, and he had a really good season as a senior for Miami, Ohio in 25-26. So he has the shooting down, and I got Suter in the late second round. He's a player who was so impressive at the G League Combine that he got promoted to the regular NBA Combine. So I think he's getting drafted. I think someone's going to pick him. The Nuggets get a big for depth. After their small forward, Aaron Gordon and Joker are the next 2 UFAs for the Nuggets. Nelson can play the 4 or the 5. I think 6'8", 219, that's closer to the 4 than the 5, and you could even argue that's 3. That's a small forward body at the 4. So, but Nelson, I think Nelson is the player that the Nuggets will take at 49 if he's there. And, I feel like that's the player they're going to pick if I had to gauge or guess what's going to happen. So I've got the Nuggets going with Isaiah Nelson here. Gillespie, iPad's at 12% now. I've moved a lot quicker. Quickly, they need a backup to Quickly. I initially had Bennett Sturtz in my first mock, but I feel like Morris Johnson's versatility was just too attractive to pass up on at 19. But you can get your point guard at 50. Again, it's a strong point guard draft. Milos Uzan would be a good backup to Trae Young at point guard. Remember, Trae Young and D'Angelo Russell both have player options. Even if they both come back, I think the Wizards will draft a point guard in the second round and stash one of those point guards behind the current starter in a depth role and let him play in the G League this year. Rafael Castro out of George Washington, really good Atlantic 10 player, good short-range scorer, very good defender, and he's an ace defensively despite being raw offensively. Cade Tyson can play the 2 or the 3. Quality bench player from Minnesota. Bruce Thornton, 4-year starter at Ohio State. Averaged 10 points a game every season at Ohio State. And that's who you're getting to be Steph Curry's successor, which is a really good value at 54. Toby Lowell out of Virginia Tech. Short range. Can hit layups, attack the glass. Tyler Bilodeau out of UCLA is a good player. I got the Bulls taking him. Patrick Williams is probably going to be gone. I know Nate Biddle's a horrible defender, but he's arguably the 3rd best three-point center in this entire draft. I think that pushes him up to the late second round. And I think a team like the Hawks, who has a power forward playing center in Okonwu, would roll the dice on Biddle here as a backup center. The Pelicans go best player on the board. They get Taman Lipsey out of Iowa State. The Minnesota Timberwolves get Aaron Nakamura out of Tennessee State. This is a player who could start down the road after Edwards wants out, but for now he's basically just the bench warmer for Anthony Edwards. But he gets to learn under one of the top shooting guards in the league. And then the Wizards at 60, they get a international player to develop behind Anthony Davis. They go Pavel Bako to round out this draft. He's a better passer than Swigo, more consistent scorer, but he only makes shots from short range and medium range on tape, despite his respectable three-point percentage. So that is my top 60. I will reload the simulator, Joey. We're at 12% on the iPad. You can keep making picks, or you can auto draft. So I will let you decide. But I only put the 60 players in my mock in the simulator, but there were 70 at the combine. So the iPad's at 11%. So until the iPad's under 10%, I will let Joey pick players. If he doesn't want to make any more picks, I'll hit the auto draft button.
Just auto draft it, because I'm actually curious based on my first round board what the auto draft does.
auto draft basically takes the top player on the board. It's always the same, but auto draft gave Memphis Queetance as a, and I like that pick as a backup to Zach Edey. I can work with that. It's not the best pick, but you're getting him as a backup to Zach Edey.
Well, I don't know what teams pick where, so it's all mystery to me.
Yeah. So the Brooklyn Nets have picked 33. Memphis had picked 32. But yeah, Brooklyn Nets, I had Isaiah Evans in round 1, but Brooklyn gets him in round 2. The Sacramento Kings get Nick Martinelli at 34. Martinelli was the final player. I had a first-round grade on the Spurs. Joey gave the Spurs, at 20, he gave the Spurs Cameron Carr. And they really need that power forward, but they luck into Ejiofor at this spot here. They luck into Ejiofor at this spot, and then the Clippers get Ryan. I don't think the Clippers would take Ryan Conwell. Yeah, Joey gave the Clippers Nate Ament, so yeah, they would take Conwell in this scenario and potentially get a second day one starter in Conwell if Ament ends up starting over Kawhi Leonard next year, so they could potentially get the Thunder. I think the Thunder. What did you give the Thunder at 17? You gave the Thunder. Thunder got Morris Johnson, who would play the 3 on the Thunder, and the 4 is a bench player, and they got Visar, and then Sarver would move back to the 4. So they've got their 2 bench players. This is basically just a luxury pick for the Thunder. They'll get Jefferson here. They'll get a true 4 at power forward to push Sarver, last year's first-round pick who got injured, if we go auto pick. Or if you want to go a different direction, that's also on the table. But the iPad's at 10%, so I am going to auto draft for the remaining teams. The Bulls get Richie Saunders here. So we're on pick 41. Baba Miller ends up on the Warriors. Baba Miller ends up on the Heat. Spurs get Keyshawn Hall. And I think now we're caught up. I think now everyone... now it's caught up to where every player in my mock is basically... and then Nickel out of Vanderbilt. So basically... Okay, hold on a second here. It's not letting me... Hold on. The code... It's not letting me click on 60. Let me look at the NBA simulator here. I might have to... but yeah, Pavel Bako would be Mr. Relevant, but I'm going to check something really quickly here. Wait a minute. It's not... It's saying... It's on 6... Hold on. Is the simulator saying 60 or 61 here? Let me check something here. Nope. Wizards from Thunder is pick 60, but it's not showing pick 60. Do I have to add a second... I think I have to add another player in order for it to post pick 60. I'm looking at the code right now. I'm looking at the code right now here to figure out what the problem is. There's one of two issues. Why isn't pick 60 being posted? Either A, I need to add a second... Problem A is I might have to add another team. Because I only have 60 teams, but I think the simulator can go up to 60 picks. So I might actually have to add another team. So what I'll do is I'll add the Spurs again at 61. No, I'll add the Knicks here at 61 and see if that actually does anything. So basically, I'm going to put the Knicks at 61 as a placeholder. I think that'll fix everything. I think that'll fix everything. So Joey did have Pavel Bako, but now I'm going to Nick should be at 61. There's only 60 picks, but I think we have to have 61 teams in order for all the picks to be posted, Joey. That is what I'm double checking. That is what I'm double checking. I'm pretty certain I have to have 61 teams, even if there's only 60 picks. It's a stupid flaw within the code of the simulator. Yep. You have to have 61 teams in order for all 60 picks to be posted on the simulator. That's how the code works, Joey. I can't control that. That is how the code works. So, again, I had to add pick, and since the Knicks are probably going to be NBA champions, I figured we'll just put them in at 61 as a placeholder. But that did the trick. That's why pick 60 wasn't posted on Joey's initial simulator, and that's just a test run. But regardless, that's the draft, and the Knicks do not have a pick at 61. And I know this says round 1. I don't know how to change it from round 1 to round 2. So I just ignore that and keep track of the picks. So there's a few things I do need to tweak during my free time, but we did figure out the problem with the simulator. But yeah, that's the NBA draft.
You wrote the code.
I think we got everything covered for this week.
Do any of the code?
Well, I don't know how to change that. That's why I added a 61st team as a placeholder, so that all 60 picks show up on the simulator. That's just always how the code's been functioned. When we got this code, we used an AI program to get the code, but the AI didn't figure out the flaw in the code. So we had to rewrite it so that all 60 picks show up, and that's the only way to do it. But whatever. It's not an issue now. Is it something I should look into trying to correct after the drafts end? Yeah, it's probably. Do I think I'll end up having time to do that? I don't know, because I might just rush into the 27 simulators, because my problem is I waited until the draft order was finalized to start the simulator, but that's not a responsible way to do this. Like, if I'm building 2027 draft simulators, I should probably start on July 14th and then maybe add 2 players a day in each sport if I can. If not, just get as much football content up and then tweak it if there are risers in the fall. That's probably the more practical and more efficient strategy. So, but regardless, yeah. But I think we're done for today, and next week I will post my NHL mock. That is currently at 63 players through 2 rounds. I did start the 3rd round pick before Joey showed up today, but we got through everything. The iPad's at 9%. I'm going to end the show. William will be back next week. He'll be making picks on the NHL simulator. Joey does have an option to use the NHL draft in 2 weeks or next week as a personal day, since I gave William a personal day this week. And we're off on July 4th, the Saturday after the NHL draft. Since July 4th is on a Saturday, it's the 250th anniversary of America, I figured all 3 of us will get July 4th off. And then I did give Joey, because I figured if William needed today and July 4th off, I figured the fairest thing I could do to Joey is to give him a day off either next Saturday or the Saturday the NHL draft airs if he wants a personal day. It's on the table, but he hasn't decided about that yet. He'll get back to me when he makes a decision about that. But we will worry about that then. Next week's NHL mock draft, and then we get into the draft results for NHL. Then we get into draft streams on Restream and TalkShoe. And yeah, Tuesday before the NBA draft, I'll have a show with Emmanuel Watson, Sportshead Radio. Under the Bleachers Season 3 will premiere in August. We don't have a date yet for that. August 1st will be the day Season 16 premieres. July 12th, MLB Draft will be the season finale and episode 1000 of Draft Utopia. But that does it for episode 993 on TalkShoe. We'll be back for 994 next week as I try to break down all 7 rounds of my NHL mock, or as many picks as I can get through. But yeah, we're going to sign off. That's Joseph Potter. I'm Chris Ransom. We'll see you next Saturday. All right. So I'm in the